The Hubble Space Telescope is projected to maintain operation until at least 2030, but it has already revolutionized high-res imaging of solar system bodies in visible and ultraviolet light wavelengths, notwithstanding that only about 6% of the bodies imaged by the HST, the Hubble's telescope, are within the solar system. So a very small portion is within the solar system. Most of it's outside the solar system, I guess. NASA researcher Cindy Young and colleagues assert that a new space telescope dedicated exclusively to solar system observations would permit an extensive survey of minor solar system bodies and long-term UV observation to discern how solar system bodies change over time. Young and colleagues' recommendation therefore implies that, so their recommendation is that we get a new telescope. Very little of Hubble's time or imaging is focused on in-solar system opportunities. So they need a new one because there's obviously more in-solar system opportunities to take pictures of, and maybe they can't get any extra time. My predicted answer would be HST cannot meet the additional needs of the in-solar system group. The group cannot use HST to increase their percentage from 6% to something higher. Therefore, they need a new telescope. So there's more demand from that group who's taking in-solar system pictures. They already don't get very much of the Hubble time. Perhaps they can't get any further. So, A, the recommendation for another scope implies that HST, Hubble, will likely continue to be used primarily to observe objects outside of the solar system. Yeah, that would make sense, actually. That's not directly my guess, that the needs of the in-solar system go unfulfilled, but that would indicate, that would be true, because if HST is going to continue to primarily be out of solar system, they wouldn't be able to get a greater percentage of the Hubble time and therefore need a new telescope. That would be the correct logic. Not exactly my guess, but yeah, absolutely valid conclusion from the guess. B, will no longer be used to observe solar system objects as the telescope recommended by Young colleagues is deployed. Well, no, just if they get a new scope, they'll no longer use Hubble for in solar system. Nothing says that in the passage. We can't conclude that. C, can be modified. Hubble can be modified to observe the features of solar system objects that are of interest. Why would they modify it? Why would they want a new telescope if they can modify Hubble? So, no, that makes no sense. If anything, that's the opposite. One reason why they might want a new scope is Hubble cannot be modified to do more in solar system work. D, Hubble lacks the sensors to observe the wavelengths of light needed to discern how, no, we have no idea whether it lacks any particular sensors or details. The correct answer is A. Notice how the last sentence here is abstract. The recommendation is a new space telescope, and HST is Hubble. So it helps to read the first part of the sentence as you fill in the blank, and read it not abstractly, but more directly, or more literally, I should say. The colleagues want a new scope. That implies that Hubble cannot fill the needs of in-solar system imaging that they need, or it will likely continue. Hubble will continue to be used primarily to observe objects outside the solar system, suggesting they can't get more percentage of Hubble's time and therefore need a new scope. So again, it's helpful to translate that abstract language in the final sentence and repeat the final sentence for each answer choice as you fill in the blank. 12. Geoglyphs are large stage designs of lines or shapes created in a natural landscape. The Nazca lines were created in the Nazca Desert in Peru by several indigenous civilizations over a period of many centuries. Okay, I'm guessing this is like the alien crops where they make images over broad sections of land. Peruvian archaeologist Johnny Isla specializes in these geoglyphs. At a German exhibit about the Nazca lines, he saw an old photograph of a large geoglyph of a whale-like figure and was surprised that he didn't recognize it, so he'd not seen it before. Isla returned to Peru and used a drone to search a wide area. So he used something that could get up high in the sky and take a bigger viewpoint, looking for the figure from the air. This approach suggests that Isla thought if he hadn't already seen it, the whale-like geoglyph was probably somewhere that was not visible from the ground, right? Needed to be looked at above. So must represent, so not visible from ground. Otherwise, he would have probably seen it, given it was so big. So he needed a drone to go up and check an area where he wasn't. So must represent a species of whale that went extinct. No, this is not about a species of whale that went extinct. That's not the right answer. Is actually located in Germany, not Peru? No, it's in Peru. It says so. C, is probably in a location Isla hadn't ever come across while on the ground. Yes, it was not visible from the ground. So wherever he was on the ground, he'd never been there or couldn't see it even if he was there. He had to go somewhere new or look at it from the sky. That would be a reasonable completion of the text. D, was almost certainly created a long time after other Nazca. No, it says nothing about before or after, a comparison of time. That is not in the actual passage. So what are wrong answer types here? This is just false. Nothing in the passage says that. It's mixing up facts. Must represent a species that went extinct. That's completely irrelevant. And was almost certainly created a long time ago. That's a comparison of time. That is just a false comparison. And maybe even irrelevant, quite frankly. 13, another logically completes the text or inference question. Let's read the paragraph and make our prediction of what explains the last sentence or how it could be true given the previous information, and then match that to the answer. Some Astyanax mexicanus, a river-dwelling fish found in northeast Mexico, have colonized caves in the region. Although there's little genetic difference between the river and cave, X mexicanus, the fish, the river and cave fish, and all members of the species can emit the same sounds, biologist Carroll and colleagues found that the context and significance of those sounds vary by location. So they can make the sounds, but the sounds are different depending whether you're in a cave or a river. And right now they are the same species. Example, the click that river-dwelling mexicanus used to signal aggression is used by cave dwellers when foraging, and the acoustic properties of cavefish sounds show some cave-specific variations. So those are examples of different sounds for different uses. Highest in the colleague noticed that differences in sonic communication could accumulate to the point of inhibiting interbreeding. So could accumulate to the point of inhibiting interbreeding among fish from different locations, suggesting that, well, if the sound differences inhibit interbreeding, the fact that they are the same species with little genetic difference will change. So suggesting that the species will diverge. That's what this last information that is in our final line is true. If that's the case, then the species will diverge. So let's look for an answer that matches that. Although mexicanus living in rivers are genetically similar to those living in caves, river fish rely on sonic communication less. Again, a false comparison. Typical wrong answer choice for logically completes. B, although mexicanus is a single species at present, it could be in the process of splitting into distinct populations with different characteristics. Yeah, the different characteristics are that they use sounds in different ways. And if it's true that they're not interbreeding, they will become distinct species. So that looks like it's the right answer. Did I circle that? That's a mistake. I meant to X that out, not circle it. Okay. B looks to be the right answer. That matches our anticipated answer. C, although mexicanus emits sounds, the fish living in rivers produce some sounds that the fish living in caves do not, and vice versa. Okay, so the fish living in rivers produce some sounds the fish living in caves do not. No, that's actually just not true. That's false. According to the text, they use those sounds in different ways, but they emit the same sound according to the text. So that's incorrect. D, although Mexicanus from different locations can interbreed currently, that's true. Riverfish and cavefish are sufficiently genetically distinct. No, that's not true. They have little genetic difference according to the text there, so that's wrong. That they can be considered separate species. That is wrong. They are the same species now, but if they don't interbreed anymore, they will become different species. B is the correct answer. By the way, this is kind of a tricky question because if you did not pick up on the idea or the first part of the sentence leading up to the blank sufficiently that they are not interbreeding, you might get a very different answer. You might be tempted to choose one of the other answers. So pay very close attention to the sentence, the last sentence leading up to the blank. What are the conditions? That almost always tells you what you need to answer or fill in for the blank. Another logically completes the text problem. Inference. Let's read the passage and try to predict the correct answer. If some artifacts recovered from excavations of the settlement of Kulokata in modern Ghana date from the 13th century, that may lend credence to claims that the settlement was founded before or around that time. So, okay, we found artifacts that were from the 13th century, so maybe the actual settlement was from around that time too. There's other evidence, okay? However, so again, when we have one evidence and another set of evidence, they're usually contrasting. However, strongly supporting a 14th century founding for Kulokata. If both the artifact dates and the 14th century founding data are correct. So again, we always want to read that condition in the last sentence against the premises, because that's really going to tell us what we need to fill in the blank. So we have this question of whether it's 13th or 14th century. This says, okay, here's what's true. The artifact dates are absolutely correct, the 13th century artifacts, and the founding was, in fact, the 14th century. So the idea that the claim it was founded in the 13th century is wrong. Well, if that's true, that would imply that many of the artifacts that dated to the 13th century did not originally come from Kulokata. So imply that artifacts, they came from elsewhere. So maybe they had some, housewares or equipment or some kind of artifacts that were, many years old, but they had been passed down through generations or something like that. So let's see if an answer choice picks up on that idea. Artifacts from the 14th century CE were more commonly recovered than artifacts from no, that's probably why they think the 14th century, but that is not answering the question, okay? B, the artifacts originated elsewhere. Okay, yeah, right, that's our prediction. And eventually reached Kulokata through trade or migration. Yeah, exactly. So they could have been older artifacts that came to the city in the 14th century when it was founded. C, Kulokata was founded by people from, why did I X that? I have no idea why I X that, because that looks like the right answer. Sorry about that. B looks to be the correct answer. I'll circle it. C, Kulokata was founded by people from a different region than had been previously assumed. No, we don't know if it was founded by different people in a different region. That's just not a logical conclusion we can make. Excavations at Kulokata may have inadvertently damaged some artifacts dating to the 14th century. Okay, but that's irrelevant. So how does that tell us anything about their 13th century objects or artifacts there? And it was founded in the 14th century. This says nothing about that. Neither does C for that matter. A, why is that wrong? Artifacts of the 14th century are not commonly recovered. Then artifacts, that's also essentially irrelevant. So notice all the answer choices on this one are basically irrelevant. Indigenous cultures. So by the way, I'm going to read the passage first because this is an inference or logically completes the text. So I'm going to read the paragraph and then very carefully read the sentence leading up to the blank that I need to fill in. Indigenous cultures possess unique knowledge of the medicinal uses of plants. According to a 2021 study, 73% of the medicinal uses of plants native to North America are reflected in the vocabulary of a single indigenous language. Okay. However, as more and more indigenous people exclusively speak a globally dominant language, such as English, their ancestral languages fade from daily use, which means what? Perhaps our knowledge of medicinal plants will fade as well, because they seem to only be reflected in that indigenous language. These facts lend added importance to tribal nations' efforts to preserve their languages by ensuring the continued use of Cherokee, Ojibwe, and the hundreds of other indigenous languages in what is now the United States. Tribal nations are also, so by ensuring the continued use of the native languages, tribal nations are ensuring the passage of knowledge of medicinal plants. Okay, so let's see if an answer matches that. Increasing the number of medicinal plants represented in the vocabularies. No, it's not important that we just increase the number of medicinal plants in the vocabulary. That's not the idea. That's kind of irrelevant to the passage. B, transmitting terms for medicinal plants from indigenous languages to globally. By encouraging the native languages, they're not helping transition the medicinal plant names to English. That's just not in the text. That's not in the passage. Might seem reasonable, one would want to do that, but that's not mentioned in the passage. C, preserving knowledge about the medicinal value of plants native to the tribal nation's lands. Yes, they're ensuring passage of the knowledge, right? They're preserving the knowledge about the plants. Yes, that is going to be our correct answer. D, ensuring that citizens of tribal nations have physical access. No, it's nothing about gaining physical access to the plants. Okay, that's simply not relevant. It's irrelevant and not in the passage. The right answer. C is the correct answer.